Hello everyone. Good morning and welcome to today's The Hindu News Analysis. Myself Nitin K. Biju, I'll be attending the civil service interview this year. Coming to the front page, India records another spike with 3,875 new cases and 194 deaths, which is a huge increase. Also, Air India to charge commercial fares from the standard Indians who wants to return from other countries like the Gulf and the Southeast nations. India needs a big stimulus package. Abhijit Banerjee. So Abhijit Banerjee is the Nobel Prize winner. He says that India needs a big stimulus package, especially the main way forward will be to give money directly to the vulnerable 60% of the population. Also, 70% markup fails to dampen Delhi's spirit. So it is related to the increase in the liquor prices, the alcohol prices, which was increased to 70% of the MRP that by Delhi. It is also called as the special corona fee. So still the queues are very huge. So why the state governments are very much interested in selling the liquor is that the liquor and the other alcohol based sale, they are out of the GST. So since it is out of the GST, the revenue directly goes to the state, and the liquor sales, they form a major part of the state government's own tax revenue. As you all know, state government has different sources of revenue: revenues and non-tax revenues. So under this tax revenues, the state government has their own tax revenue as well as the share of the GST, right? So under this own tax revenue, the state government, the one of the major, around 50 to 20% of the state tax revenue, on tax revenue, comes from liquor sales. So that's why the state governments are so much interested in this liquor sale. Following the path, the Haryana to levy COVID cess on liquor, so that the states will be getting more money to, especially at this stage when the state finances are in crunch. Now, coming to the main articles which are covered in today's Hindu newspaper analysis, there will be 7 articles from the Hindu newspaper which will be covering in detail. Before moving to the articles, I want you to pause for a second and attempt the question by yourself. After discussing the relevant article, we'll be coming back to the same question again. Coming to the first article, Center sets rules for bringing back Indians. So, as we all know, the center has decided to bring back the stranded Indians who are stuck in countries like the Gulf and the Southeast Asian nations. So, also the Ministry of Home Affairs have issued guidelines to enable persons, including the foreigners who have been stranded in India due to the lockdown, to return abroad or to fly overseas from the country. So, both outward journey and inward journey is covered here. Also, those who are coming back from abroad, they would have to submit the result of the RT-PCR test. So that is the test for testing the presence of the antigen in the human body. Antigen is the virus, right? So we have already discussed that there are two types of test. One is the antigen test, that is the PCR test, as well as there is an antibody test, which is called as the serological test. These are the two types of tests which are being used for testing COVID-19 infections. So this is an important prelims aspect. Please go through it. Also, the people should be willing to undergo a institutional quarantine for a minimum period of 14 days at their own cost. So these are the part of the guidelines which I issued. Also, there should be an undertaking that they are making the journey at their own risk. Also, based on the registrations received, the Ministry of External Affairs, they'll prepare flight or ship-wise details, such as the age of the travelers, the name, gender, phone number, place of residence, final destination, and information about the RT-PCR test taken. Also, these details will be shared with the respective states, the destination states, so that the states can make preparations for receiving the passengers. Also, the thermal screening of the passengers would be done on the arrival, and all passengers will be asked to download the Arogya Setu app on their mobile devices. Also, the passengers who are having the symptoms of the virus will be immediately taken to a medical facility. Also, another important aspect here is that the cost of the travel will be borne by the travelers themselves. So the government would not be paying for their travel here. Also, Air India would be operating around 64 flights between May 7th to 13th, mainly to the Gulf and the Southeast Asian countries. So these are the main provisions of the guidelines released by the Ministry of Home Affairs. Coming to the second topic, ships on the way to Maldives, UAE. So the Navy has dispatched two ships, INS Jalaswa and INS Magar, to Mali under the Operation Samudra Setu to repatriate stranded Indian citizens. So this operation becomes very important, Operation Samudra Setu. Okay, and the evacuation operation will start on May 8 as the part of the phase 1 efforts the Navy said on Tuesday. So May 8 is the date when the INS Jalashwa will reach Mali. So then the operation will start. Also, defense sources confirm that INS Shardul and INS Airavat has set sails to the UAE. So four ships have in effect gone to two countries, that is Mali and UAE, to bring back the Indians who are stranded there. So here only the prelims fact should be remembered, that is the Operation Samudra Setu, right? Now coming back to the practice question, now it will be easy for you to attempt it. Which of the following is the operation to bring back stranded Indians back from Maldives in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic? Operation Samudra Setu, Operation Cactus, Operation Rahat, Operation Maitri. So here the answer is option A, Operation Samudra Setu. So here three other operations are also given. Please go through that. So Operation Cactus is again related with Maldives, but it was undertaken in the around 20 to 30 years back, related to the political situation in Maldives. Okay, please go through it. And Operation Rahat, it is related to India's operation in Yemen during the Yemen crisis. And Operation Maitri is related to India's efforts help to the Nepal during the Nepal earthquake. So please make a note of all such operations. Make a list of all such operations, and ensure make a list that who conducted these operations, whether it is Air Force, it is Army, it is Navy. So make a A4 sheet which has the tabulation of these informations. Coming to the next article, China launches new rocket, spacecraft. So, China on Tuesday successfully launched a new rocket and prototype spacecraft, the state media said, in a major test of the country's ambitions to operate a permanent space station and send astronauts to the moon. So this mission, the spacecraft and rocket, has been launched in the quest of sending human beings to the space as well as to the moon. So the rocket's name is the Long March 5B. The spaceship will one day transport astronauts to the space station that China plans to complete by 2022. So here the homework which I am giving is name the space station. Name the space station that China plans to complete by 2022, and eventually to the moon. China is planning to take human beings eventually to the moon through this use of rocket and the spacecraft. So as of now, the United States is the only country to have successfully sent human beings to the moon. But Beijing has made huge strides in its effort to catch up, sending astronauts into space, satellites into orbit, and a rover to the far side of the moon. So this was in current affairs last year. China had sent a rover to the far side of the moon. Okay, I hope you will remember the name of the mission. Okay. Now coming to the editorial of today, the mark of zero. So here the article is regarding the successful efforts by the Kerala government in containing the COVID-19 pandemic. So with containment strategies in place even before the first case of novel coronavirus was detected on Jan 30, Kerala appears to have finally hammered the curve flat. So as we all know, the first case in India, it was confirmed in Kerala on Jan 30. There were some students who had returned from Wuhan, right? So even the second phase of the COVID-19 second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, again the first cases were detected in Kerala. That was from a family who came back from Italy, right? So even though they had the first cases, they were able to successfully flatten the curve. On May 1st, for the first time, the state reported zero new cases, and again in two consecutive days, that is on May 3rd and May 4th, the state had reported zero new cases. That is a big achievement. Also, since April 22nd, except on 4 days, the number of new cases reported has remained either the same or fewer than the number of recoveries. So the number of recoveries are increasing more than the number of new cases, right? So that is a statistics which says that the flattening of the curve is happening in Kerala. So also the small number of the cases reported so far only 499 cases have been reported. It demonstrates how excellent its containment efforts has been. Also, what is more remarkable is that around 462 of those infected have fully recovered. Out of 499, 462 have been recovered already. And that includes an elderly couple who are aged 93 and 88 years of age. Also, thus, and they have only had 3 deaths in the whole state, and that comes to a case fatality rate of around 0.6% against the national average of 3.3%. The containment success can be traced back to how Kerala did not wait for the directions from the center but instead led from the front. When the number of cases increased to 12 on March 10th, so March 10th is the day when the one day before the WHO declared the coronavirus, the COVID 19 as a pandemic. So WHO also declared it only on March 11th. So before that, on March 10th, Kerala had shut down all the educational institutions and entertainment centers, banned large gatherings, and appealed to people to avoid visiting religious places. Also, it realized the merits of containing virus transmission by quickly tracing all the contacts during the 2018 Nipah outbreak. So, the experience of the Nipah outbreak of 2018 helped them in successfully perfecting the contact tracing of the infections, thereby following the WHO guidelines. WHO has issued a guidelines, right? So one is to test, then to trace. That is contact tracing, then isolation, then treatment. So this is the four-step strategy which is set by WHO. So Kerala has done this to perfection. Thus, the containment strategy and the testing strategies are even named as Kerala model. Also, there are other reasons why Kerala was able to successfully contain the virus, right? One is the Kerala has a very good healthcare infrastructure in the place, even down to the primary healthcare centers. The government spending on the primary healthcare has been excellent, and thereby Kerala was able to have a good health infrastructure. Even though private sector is there, the government didn't reduce the public expenditure on health. So this was a main difference compared to Kerala and other, even the western countries like the US. They invested more on, I mean, they focus more on private sector in healthcare. Now it is said that now the public's health investment has become more important, right? As seen in the example of Kerala. Also, political leadership and the close and complete involvement of the government at all levels with the bureaucracy and local community have been a huge advantage. So all the stakeholders who are involved, they were able to successfully come together and coordinate the efforts against the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, the very different health seeking behavior and the high literacy uh, to have played a pivotal role in the war against the virus. So it is a success born out of decades old social revolution and development. This is also the reason why other states, even if they emulate the measures adopted by Kerala to fight the virus, may not be able to achieve the same level of success. So it is the historical advantage of Kerala which has also helped it fight the virus. So uh, it says that long term investment in the social development, for example health and education, is much necessary for long term sustainability of the state, right? Coming to the next article, pathways to a more resilient economy. So here the author talks about many paradigm shift which will happen after the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 global pandemic is a catastrophe for both human lives and for the economies. Economists cannot predict in what form the economy will emerge from it. So here the author is trying to analyze the economy for the changes that might happen and that should happen after this COVID-19 pandemic. So he's mentioning about seven radical ideas. One is degrowth. So what is this degrowth? Here the author is telling, along with other Nobel laureates in economics, they are telling to call upon the rethink of the fundamentals of the economies, especially the purpose of the GDP. As we all know, presently economy, the growth is measured from the dimension of the GDP only. That is the main thing which measures growth now. So now we have to degrowth it. For example, we have to focus on other aspects other than growth also. We have learned about the concepts of growth and development. There are some differences between it, right? So we have to focus on aspects other than growth, which is highly focused on the GDP. Okay, for example, we can see that in Bhutan, a country called Bhutan has the concept of gross national happiness. So they focus on the overall happiness. Happiness of the citizen is much more wider than just economic aspects. There can be a political aspect, there can be environmental aspect as well. So the author is telling to focus on aspects other than growth also. Also, second aspect says that boundaries between countries are good. So this is against the philosophy of globalization. Globalization wants a world without boundaries. They want the world to be a huge village, a global village, right? Without boundaries. So even the WTO and all says that boundaries impede the flow of trade, finance, and people. But now, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it is said that the COVID-19 has given another reason to maintain boundaries. Also, coming to the third aspect, third thinking is government is good. So government is good in the sense, as we all know, along with globalization, another concept which was very important till now was privatization. Everyone was telling that the government should do what is much necessary only and come out of all other aspects, come out of all other sectors. But now the COVID-19 has reinforced the role of the government. So now, so the third point is telling that the government is good. Also, Ronald Reagan, he was the US president. He earlier in the 1980s and 1990s, he used to say that government is not the solution, but government is the problem. And it has been ended up by the COVID-19. So in the 1990s and all, there was a strong support in terms of privatization, supported by Ronald Reagan of the US and even the Margaret Thatcher in the Britain. So these concepts which support the privatization were also called as Reaganism and Thatcherism. So now the current is against Reaganism, Thatcherism, and privatization. Now, due to COVID-19, the role of the government has come to prominence. Also, coming to the fourth point, the market is not the best solution. As we have seen now, the market dependent economies of the US and even the European countries are suffering badly due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Whereas, areas where the government had played a major role, for example, in case of India, coming to the state of Kerala, the government's role has been helpful in fighting the pandemic. So here the point says that the marketization of economies has contributed to also to increasing inequalities in wealth over the last 50 years. Also, coming to the fifth point, now citizen welfare, not just consumer welfare, must be the objective of progress. So, if we see only in the economical perspective, human beings are seen as consumers and producers. But we are not living only in an economy. Everything should not be seen as an economical perspective. In societies, they are citizens. Human beings are citizens, right? Citizens have a broader set of needs than consumers. Consumers just see the economical aspect. So the article is telling that citizens should be viewed as citizen welfare should be the main thing, not consumer welfare. Also, here it is written that citizen welfare includes justice, dignity, and societal harmony. So these are the aspects which is not seen in the economical perspective. It is much more wider than the economical perspective. Also, competition must be restricted, restricted, restrained, right? So as we all know, till now everyone is striving on competition, but COVID-19 has said that it's not competition but collaboration which is essential for progress. Also, it is against the Darwinian theory, that is survival of the fittest, right? So that is focused more on competition. So it is the article is saying that it is not the there has some very important issues which are related to competitions. Also, blind faith in competition misses the reality that human capabilities have advanced more than other species have by evoking institutions for collective action, not competitive action. Also, further progress to achieve the SDG goals, also it also requires collaboration, not competition, right? So that is the sixth point. Coming to the seventh point, intellectual property belongs to the public. As we all know, intellectual property monopolies are producing enormous wealth for their owners, though many were developed on the back of huge public investment. So here they are telling that the intellectual property should belong to the public and not to some people. Monopoly on intellectual property should not happen, right? Also, coming to the next point, the main thing they are telling is, so there are two way forwards. One is to put fuel in the tank, more fuel in the tank, that is to provide stimulus, economic revival within the existing institution, that is called as putting fuel in the tank. It is not sufficient. The whole vehicle must be redesigned to. That means that the whole economic system should be redesigned in a way that more equality comes into picture. That is, the economic system should be more just. That is what the article is talking about. Also, innovations are required at many levels to create a more resilient and just world. The redesign of economies of business and our lives must begin with questions about purpose. So, what is the purpose of economic growth? Is it just the increase in the GDP or increase in citizen welfare? That these kind of questions should be asked. What is the purpose of businesses and other institutions? Whether they should increase inequality or whether they should promote equality. So, what is the basic purpose of our lives? What needs and whose needs do institutions and each of us fulfill by our existence? So, we can see a general tendency against capitalism towards the increase in the ideas of socialism and the role of governments. Now, coming to the next article, getting over pandemic stage fright. So, here the article talks about community transmission. Community transmission. So, we'll be discussing in detail about it now. So, recent reports indicate that 1 in 15 COVID-2 infected individuals in the national capital is a healthcare worker. So, here they have given many examples of healthcare workers who got infected or even died by the COVID-19 pandemic. One is this Ayurvedic physician, then comes another doctor from Kurnool, and comes another neurosurgeon in Chennai. So here, why the increase in the more fatalities in the even in the doctor communities? It is because the warning of community transmission has not been set. As we all know, the governments are trying to deny the existence of community transmission, whereas the evidence says the otherwise. The evidence says that community transmission has already started in many places, but we are not acknowledging it. So we'll be discussing about this in detail. What is community transmission? One infected person in the community, unaware that he is infected, infects others in the community. For example, if A was infected by a non-contact B, then in epidemiology we say B infected A. So we know that who infected A, that is person B has infected person A. But in case of community transmission, what happens is that when the contact is unknown, we don't know whether B infected A or we don't know who infected A, right? So we can only say that someone in the community has infected A, but we cannot identify that someone. So that's why the term is called as community transmission. So we are not able to identify from where it started, right? So that is the idea behind community transmission. So communities, the article is telling that community transmission has started in India by or even before mid March 2020. So every pandemic emerges from a country of origin. For example, the COVID-19 pandemic has emerged in China, as we all know. So here we are going to analyze the various stages of the transmission. For every other country other than China, the initial infection would be from the imported cases from another country, right? So first stage of transmission is through imported cases. Now if secondary transmission occurs from the imported infection, it is qualified as a contact of imported cases. So the second stage is called local transmission. So local transmission means a person who has come to in contact with the imported case gets a infection, so that is called local transmission. Here also we are able to trace the link from the infected person towards this imported infection, right? So the link can be traced, so that's why it is called local infection. Also, as the epidemic advances, the community transmission is natural and inevitable. As we already seen, what is community transmission? We are not able to trace a link between the newly infected patient to another infected patient, right? Also, if the intention is to intercept the chains of transmission, then there should be an acknowledgement of the indigenous or community transmission. So that is what the article is talking. We need to first acknowledge that there has been some cases of community transmission. So, but the community, a country that denies community transmission is at its own peril. Once community transmission of the COVID-19 came to light on March 18, there should have been warning to all the medical professionals. Also, there should have been recommendations of strict implementation of the protective gear and all other protocols, right? But it has not happened as of now. So, protecting the lives of the healthcare professional by acknowledging community transmission and strict implementation of appropriate personal protective equipment will ensure that there is no attrition to the pool of the healthcare professionals, which is very important at this stage of a uh, COVID-19 pandemic. Because if healthcare professionals are themselves affected and they are being quarantined, then who will do the treatment, right? So that's why it is very important to acknowledge the community transmission. So coming to the next article, it's time for a virtual judiciary. So, as we all know, the earlier everyone was fighting for open judiciary, open courts, where, but the issue is that presently the courts are having a huge pendencies. So the article is saying that the virtual judiciary will reduce the cost, also leads to speedy disposal of cases. So during the nationwide lockdown imposed to contain the spread of COVID-19, it has become clear that many activities can be done online. For example, we all have apps in our phones: Amazon, Flipkart, Swiggy, Uber, Ola, Zomato, etc. Also, the concept of work from home has increased. Now, people have recognized that work from home can be as efficient as going to the office and working. So, this brings us to one question: how can we use technology to ensure speedy disposal of the cases? So, there are many hurdles, definitely. So, the Economic Survey of 2019 and 20 dedicates a chapter to the pendency of the tax cases and revenue cases. So, here the mention is about, the focus is about tax cases and revenue cases. Also, the existing infrastructure of the judiciary is grossly underutilized. For example, there are tribunals such as the income tax tribunal. They function only for half a day for most of the time. To make matters worse, most of the courts are closed for Christmas, summer vacations. Also, the judges are not accountable for efficiency and performance. So these kind of issues are causing a huge pendency in the cases. So it is in this context that we make the case for a virtual judiciary. So what can we do in case of a virtual judiciary? We can submit various details. For example, the all the papers related to case via email, right? The judges can decide the case based on the available information. Wherever the judge requires clarification, he or she can seek the same through email again. So here the author is telling that email can be used to fasten up the process. Also, the virtual judiciary will result in substantial savings and cost, but also will lead to speedy disposal of the cases. The productivity of the lawyers will also increase substantially, as the visits to the courts and long waiting hours will be more of an exception than a rule. So the traveling time will be reduced and the long waiting time will be reduced. So the efficiency of the lawyers will also increase. The fact that the jurisdiction of a court is defined by geography makes no sense in matters such as taxation and company law, right? So as we all know, like, courts function on the basis of a geographical jurisdiction, right? So but in cases of taxation and company laws, this geographical jurisdiction is not necessary. All judges should be empowered to handle any such cases wherever it originates. So this will help to properly channelize the human resources of the judiciary, right? So this will result in multiple advantages. One is the better utilization of manpower and infrastructure by equitably distributing the work. For example, so as we all know, some areas like metropolitan cities have very high pendency of cases, but whereas some other areas are having less cases. So if you are able to remove this geographical jurisdiction, we'll be able to equitably distribute the cases to all the courts, right? Also, the malpractices will be limited, as there will be no longer be a familiarity between the lawyers and judges in the same city. So this is another case where we will be able to reduce the corruption in the judiciary. So imagine the overall savings and extent of improvement of the judicial ecosystem if 70% of the cases get decided without going to the court. So this is what the article is talking about, the benefit of the virtual courts. But there are some challenges also as we all know, while writing answering answer for UPSC, we have to balance. We have to write balanced answer. We don't have to support entirely the case for virtual course. We have to mention the challenges also. There are a lot of challenges which are involved in this virtual course. I want you to make a note of the challenges which are related to this virtual course also. Okay. Now, coming to the other articles which are important in today's newspaper, first is the amid high inflation, Iran to get a new currency. As we all know, due to the US sanctions in Iran, the commodity prices, the inflation has increased in Iran, right? So, due to this inflation, the currency value of Iran, presently the currency is real, right? So, real has lost its value. So, due to the loss of value, they have to uh, come to a new currency system. So the new currency system is called as Toman, Toman. So this article you can read in as an extra thing. Also coming to the second article, India needs a big stimulus package. Abhijit Banerjee. Please go through this article, which is there in the first page of the newspaper. So that's all for today's news. I hope you like the video. Please press the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share the video with your friends. Have a great day. Thank you.